Probably ticket and elbow. A-long is still gonna be A-long if you're attack or defense. And now we got this pause. Anyone can guess what this is? Anyone? Can you guess it? Hello everyone, Boaster here. I'm back with another tutorial to help you climb the ranks in Valorant, brought to you by PCSpecialist and the official Fnatic gaming PC. So in this tutorial, I'm going to be going around every map, talking about all the basic callouts and helping you improve your communication in your ranked games and become the perfect teammate. Yay. And also, I'm going to be giving you a kind of like insider sneak peek of some of the comms that we used when we were on stage in Iceland.
Shot wall.
Yeah, shot. Oh.
Nice, Seven. Nice.
No! So why are callouts important? Well, you're only going to get a certain amount of information from the minimap when you die or when your teammate dies. So in order to kind of add specificity to it, you need to tell your teammates exactly where the enemy is so they can go in knowing exactly where to aim and pop his head off and trade you. Also, it's super useful. Like say if you see someone pushing you, you can't just say A site, because A site could mean everything. So it's really handy in order to kind of pinpoint that location down and be like, whoa, one in market. And your teammate's like, I know where market is. Turns around and bops them. Right, it's time to hop into the map. Let's go. Icebox first. All right, so the first tip of the day is make sure you get yourself a good headset with a quality microphone. And let's go.
I got the spike.
Generally, people just tend to call this kind of T-spawn. And then we have ramp, although in my team, like everything's kind of different. Like we have a bit more specific. So like in our team, it's like, this is called belt, for instance. And this is called nest. And then this would be called Shazam. But generally in your ranked games, this will all be called nest. And then we have this area here. Now I'm not entirely sure, people might even call this nest in your ranked games, but in my team we call it tower. Whereas on the map it says nest, and maybe people will call this heaven. So it really depends what, you got to pick up as to what your people in ranked are actually saying. This is pipes, this is orb. We call this danger. If you're watching from the NA though, I'm pretty sure in NA they call it 410. There we go, Mr. International here. I call this fridge. But it could be called like something else. So it could be like generator or Jenny. Oh, this is a fun spot right here. Since there's a famous player that plays this position quite a lot and his name is Nats. He loves going here. So we call this Nats. And a fun fact, when we played against Gambit, we actually pre-fired this spot when we were retaking and killed Nats there. So it was quite funny that he happened to be there. Generally, every bomb site has like a default plant spot. This is probably like the default plant spot. So yeah, if they're saying the planting default, this is probably it. But in our team, we call this default and this safe. Like I say, like specificity for us in a team environment is very important. But in ranked, you can probably get away with just the like bare minimum. We call this house, but like I say, in ranked, they might call this like nest again. But we call this house, or people might say above you. This is what we call rafters, and then backside. Okay, so we have backside rafters. And then we call this like ninja in our team because like say if we're retaking, we'd be like, oh, care for ninja. So then we'd like come here and like clear it like this and whatnot. And then we got screens and then like top screens. So this one's actually a worldwide comm, I think. Everyone calls this screens, I think. And then on top of screens. Yeah, and that's it for this side. Oh, barrels. So obviously I think everyone calls this barrels. So this could be quite a nice comm. Rainers love to play here, and Jets love to play there because if they get a kill, they can get away quite easily. Now we have the generic CT spawn area. We call this connector in my team, but generally I think people will just be saying, I don't know what people will say if they see him here, like middle probably. We call this boiler. We call this ramp as well. So this is like mid ramp. You got middle here. And then I call this like underbridge or under. And then we call this like a specific comm, which is just tube, which is kind of worldwide as well. Tube, and then you got kitchen, and you got halls. Like all these comms, we kept the same as well. We call this hut because it's kind of like a little hut underneath, and then it's just really simple comms. Generally you want your callouts to be like 1 syllable or 2 syllables. We got snow pile over here because it's like, this is actually what it's called, snow pile. We call this orange, this whole track orange. Then we call this speedway. This is actually called cables, but To be fair, in ranked, this will all be site. Like if I was to quickly go through ours, it would be Dino, Heaven, Cables, Crane, Glass, and then Snowman, because there's a snowman up here. Fun fact, you can shoot him. And then this would be, I guess, in ranked CT spawn area, but we call this garage or shed. This one's actually worldwide. You got yellow here. This is actually called default. So now you can actually plant here safely, well, unless they're obviously in snowman or glass area. But yeah, this is called default. I'm sure people call this like top site or in site. We call this white. We actually call this Defo from Gambit because he plays up here a lot. You probably, if you saw the games, he got up here and he gets up here as well. We call this roof because this is like a roof area. And we got another garage, and any orb point is just orb. So there's 2 orbs on the map. So this is orb and this is orb as well. And then we call this green, I think. So those are the callouts that we do. We have more specific callouts as well, but I think I've already told you quite a lot of specific comms. Believe it or not, we have more. We have quite a bit to revise every day to make sure we are communicating with our teammates precisely where the enemies are, because it helps us react better. All right, now we are on Ascent. As I run through the map, you're probably wondering, like, blimmin' hell, he uses a lot of like player names as spots. It's more of like a Fnatic thing. I think other teams might do it too, but like if there's a player that plays there a lot and we know them to play there quite a lot, we kind of just call it that because it's easier to remember when you know a player plays there, you know? All right, so we'll start over towards the B side of the site. So generally we call this kind of B main. This would be B main. This would be like outside B main in ranked, I guess. Jets love playing in here as well, you know, post up the AWP, easy dash away. We call this boat. We call this logs. This is like very generic stuff. Speedway, and then obviously B site, you've got the triple box, you've got green, and you've got jail. And maybe teams call it boathouse, but we call it jail. Moving on to the next bit, we got your boys in market. You got pizza, that was an easy one. You got bench, you got bike, and generally this is kind of like the mid area. Then we've got like catwalk or short, and then when you go up to short, there's a cubby. We call this dog, don't know why. A lot of people will call all of this short, which you can get away with in ranked. We call this like tree and then garden, because obviously there's a giant tree here. Now we're on to the A site. You've got Jenny, you've got, actually this is an NA com as well. This is called Dice. But maybe in EU it would just be called green. We call this tower. We call this one tower. Lots of Jets like to play here. They peek and get out, or they'll peek and get out, and it's quite nice. This is generally called A main. You got wine, and then you got outside A main with gelato, top mid. We've got Link over here, and then obviously this is called defenders spawn. But we have a more specific comm called jump spot. So, because teams like to do this sometimes, jump up here and spot that. So those are the comms for Ascent. All right, so we're on split, and yes, you might be slightly overwhelmed with all the comms I'm kind of just bombarding at you. So if you ever feel in your ranked games that you just don't know what's going on, just press caps lock, and then you'll see that on the map that Riot have provided, they've given you your own kind of comms that you can do. These callouts are a bit more broader. They take up the majority of the map, but the ones that I tend to go into are a bit more pinpoint. You know, they're a bit more precise, and they're the more important positions where enemies will often play. So to be able to like specify exactly where they are is better. Starting on A, so obviously we call this cafe because there's a nice little coffee shop outside. And then obviously this would be A main. You've got orb again. Bear in mind, we actually haven't gone through the callouts as precisely on Fnatic. So I'm going through the old Fnatic callouts. So we used to call this Dino again, because there's a dinosaur. And the enemy teams love playing here, you know, like they love getting this off angle and finding time to peek and getting out and whatnot. We call this A heaven. And obviously you've got vents. We call this vents, and then we call this ropes. This is a kind of common situation. If you wanted to split A, you'd come up the vents here, the ropes here, and you'll be in A heaven. Obviously the enemies don't really want to give you it, so you'd have to like clear out all the angles. But here we'd have bin. This would be called CT spawn. And then we're coming out here. This is now rafters. And then we've got flower. Now flower kind of takes up this spot and this spot, but if you're coming down here, if someone says flower, you know roughly where they are. But another common call out in ranked would be under heaven, you know, because it is technically under the heaven. You'll drop down and go into it. You've got CT spawn here. We actually call this screens to make it a bit more precise, because this is more defender spawn and this is closer to the site. So we don't want to, we want to differentiate. So this is called screens. The three most common call outs I'd say you need to learn are maps, probably ticket and elbow. They're the most common spots people would play. Snacks is also another one people would play, and under heaven. I feel like if you've got them, that will suffice. Also what that does, so when you're charging onto the site and you want to plant the bomb, you can tell your teammates exactly where you've planted, whether you plant ticket or behind map, or this is actually God plant because it's the best plant in the game, especially because the after plant is so strong in A heaven, and then you've got the default plant. Moving on to B. Middle, male, M-A-I-L, not M-A-L-E. You got heaven, and we call this stairs because enemies often play here, so this is one that you need to learn. Pixel, so this is like a pixel angle where they can hide in, and then you peek into them. This is quite a good angle in your ranked games, especially at lower elo. Then you've got kind of rafters again. We've got danger down here, mainly because we saw like a danger sign, so care for that. And then we generally call this kind of pillar, and then backside, default, God plant, because this is the best plant on this side of the map. Then we actually call this shroud, because in CSGO, shroud was often boosted in places, and those spots ended up being called shroud, so we're kind of taking that with us too. And then obviously we got B main here. So B main control, teams would often fight for this. And as we're coming out, I'd be like, one shroud, dead. Pillar, dead. Danger, dead. Heaven, dead. Backside, and then default. I actually call this orange. Don't know why. Well, actually, let me just quickly explain. The reason why we don't have the callouts correctly on Split is because it was always Fnatic's banned map. So we never actually played it. So how am I meant to have the callouts, like the specific callouts for it? I gotta tell you what PC I'm playing on, and that is the official Fnatic gaming PC brought to you by PCSpecialist. With a wide range of components to choose from, just like your agent pool, that's a shout out to all you dirty one tricks, you better learn some more agents. You can build a Fnatic PC that is tailor-made to meet your exact requirements. Train, scrim, compete, and stream with a range that features the latest AMD Radeon RX 6000 series and the NVIDIA RTX 30 series graphics cards. The Fnatic PC is engineered to deliver powerhouse performance for all gamers and qualify Fnatics for champions. Let's just say it delivered on its promise. AMD Ryzen 5000 series desktop processors power the most demanding games and obliterate multi-threaded tasks like 3D or video rendering. PCSpecialist will ensure your gaming PC is fully cable managed, effectively hiding any unnecessary cables and giving your PC a neat and tidy aesthetic. What, is this PC like Marie Kondo or something? Every PCSpecialist Fnatic PC is put through a burn-in test over a 24-hour period to ensure their stability and performance. Check the link down below to get yours. Alright, so this time we've dropped in on defender side on Haven, and like on attacker side, you're going to have comms that are the same. So A-long is still going to be A-long if you're attack or defense, or graffiti is still going to be graffiti, and this is graffiti. So even if I was to come in from this side, this is graffiti, and if I was to come in from this side, it's still graffiti. Going into the A site callouts, we have backside, we have hell, we have heaven. I normally just call this like God box because it's one of like the strongest plants is in this corner on this map because you can see it from here and here. You got the default plant. Funnily enough, this is a Fnatic callout. We call this Get Right, mainly because it's on the right, and Get Right's a famous player, so it kind of makes sense. You'll see it on another map as well. We call this quad. So this generally is going to be called sewers or short maybe in your ranked games. And you've got A main, and you've got A long. I actually think this call out is pretty important. We call it snake, but you know, you might just call it right side on the long, right side long. You might be wondering like, why do we call this snake instead of orb since there's an orb there? Well, it's because people like to tuck in here and it's quite a unique yet common angle. It's kind of weird, like you should expect it, but sometimes you don't expect it kind of thing. So that's why it has to have its own name, because it's its own space. You know, it's a nerdy spot. And then this is like close right, but we call it sandbags. So yeah, there's a slight difference. So we don't have to say close right in our games. We're just like sandbags and everyone knows, you know. We've got outside A, you've got window. We call this pit, but other people might be left side. Especially when you're like retaking onto the B site, you're gonna be like, he's on the left, but we call it pit. We call this rabbit, but you might be like, close right. If you're struggling, you can't remember what the call out is, then you can kind of give like a neat description. So if I didn't know what this is, for instance, I'd just be like, they're on the left at the bottom, you know, behind the box on the left. And then people be like, oh, there's a box there. Okay, that one. Or this one, like he peeks second mid and he's like, oh, behind this box. And then people will kind of roughly know, like we call it haystack, but it might be called haystack in ranked actually. But there are ways you can describe it. Back of the side, behind the shield. In other words, we actually call this gong. And then you've got back sight. And you've got like right side, which we call metal, and then boost, which we call shroud, and then this is the default plant spot. This is probably the safest plant spot from like pretty much most angles. The only thing you gotta watch out for is someone being like, yo, what's up? But hopefully one of your teammates is covering you. And then you got the links, so you got A link, and you've got C link, and then we're gonna go into garage. Now we call this nest, but you can call it window as well. People call it window. We just didn't want to confuse from the two windows on the site map already, you know, they're quite close to each other. And then we've got garage, and then, yeah, that's pretty much the main call for there. Call this connector, but it's up to you. Some people might call this green. We call it cryptics after Liquid's cryptics played there for 12 rounds in a row. Here we've got backside. I think this is what we call green. So this is what we call green. And then we've got backside, plat. And then this also is kind of backside, but it varies because you can be like back of plat, and then we know he's there, and then back of sight, then we know they're kind of around here. And you got logs, and then C long. And then obviously orb here, we call this orb. We do have specific comms for both sides, but C long and C cubby, C long cubby for instance, are fine as well. And that is Haven. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Bind. We've got A Heaven. We call this connector, but generally in ranked, you call it CT. We've got dock, because loading dock, we just call it that. Gate, giant gates next to it. You've got bench, and then obviously shroud or boost. Like I said earlier with the shroud thing, we like to call, if it's up on a boost, we just call it shroud. You've got triple, you've got default, and then you've got back of triple, and then like backside kind of thing. We're going into lamps now. So this is a nice little lamps area. We actually call this genie, but you don't need to call it that. I think that's a bit too precise for your ranked games. We normally call this quad, but I guess you can call this lamps and people will know roughly the direction that it's in. I will show you why it's called lamps, because above it, there's a lots of lamps. And this is why we call it genie, because there's it's like Aladdin. And now we got this pause. Anyone can guess what this is? Anyone? Can you guess it? No, probably not. But we call it get right. We got another get right. And then obviously we got TP. We got cubby here. Up short, we've got jungle. Now this is like the go-to area for Viper lineups or Brimstone lineups. You just come, oh goodness. You don't do that, but what you do is you come to this spot, and then obviously you find the lineup specifically for the agent that you're playing. This is the showers TP. Outside showers, normally people have them molly lineups from like here or somewhere around there. And then you got inside showers as well. We call this orb and then showers, mainly because once again, it's like just a little bit more specific. Now we fly around, come fly with me. We call this deer because there's a deer there, but you can probably just get away with calling all of this market in ranked. And then we have kind of like B mid, like the middle area of B or the short area of B. Got sandbags here, because there's some sandbags. And obviously you got the TP, the mid TP here. In here we've got hookah. Now I didn't really know what hookah was, but someone explained it to me. And you got a nice little pillow there where you can lie down and relax. This is actually called Mini, after our coach Mini. because we were dry running a strat, which means we were like doing a strat against only Mini, and no one checked him here, and he just killed 3 of us because he's an absolute god at the game. Once you're outside hookah, you've got plank or close left, you've got elbow, and then like if you want to be specific, we've got palm tree from here. You've got green box, you've got backside, you've got cubby, and you've got tube. And then you have CT spawn, and then we have this area, it's like labs. There we go, there's why, labs. But you don't need to call it that. You can probably just get away with calling it CT. This is what we call elbows, because obviously it's like bendy, it's like this is my elbow, you know? And then plank is a place where like people like to play and be a little bit ratty. You can have a sky flash, like getting ready here, pop it around here and go for a kill. Astra could pop a smoke here or brimstone, and then they play in their smoke. And then you're coming into octagon in NA, or as we like to call it in EU, I think, is garden. So we call this garden. And then you've got B-long, orb, and TP. We actually call this tens. So like obviously CT, it's a bit different. Like when we're running up, you can say like the right side or TP. But when we're coming up here, tens got a kill on us when we were against him in Iceland on a really crucial round. And we've now named this spot tens instead of saying left side. And then there's one last spot, fountain. Oh, and then I guess we can talk about like cactus, and then we just call this cave. So that's it for bind. Now we're probably not gonna go into breeze or fracture because they're new. If you do wanna see them though, feel free to drop a comment down below and subscribe, and then we'll get that for you, don't worry. Thank you for watching, and thank you to PCSpecialist for sponsoring this video. Now check down below all the deets about it because this PC is sick, and we'll see you in the next video where me and the boys are going on to the server and we're gonna try not commenting anything. So I don't know how that's gonna go.